says you have to stop talking. Okay? Just to review, our format is very simple. Our candidates are going to have 2 minutes to give an opening statement. Then we are going to read some questions, and the questions that I will be reading are questions that were sent to the committee prior to this evening, and so they have typed them out for me, so I'm literally going to read questions. The candidates have not seen them, so they didn't prepare for these answers. And then we will take the cards you've offered. The committee will try to take the cards and see if they fit into categories, where a lot of people are asking questions about the same thing, and I'll try to somehow phrase the question or bring up the topic so that maybe it addresses a number of people's questions. With that in mind, please remember that after we complete this process, there will be a time after the meeting where you'll be able to talk to the candidates. So perhaps if your question didn't get asked or you didn't understand perhaps their personal response, you'll have the opportunity to meet them personally and talk to them. And then when we finished our whole process of all those questions and return this time, then they will each have the opportunity to do a 1-minute closure. I'm a stickler for time because I think it's part of being fair is everyone gets the same amount of time. So when we say your time is up, that means you complete your statement. Doesn't mean you go into another paragraph of information, okay? So please remember that. That when we say time is up, you need to finish your statement and just stop, okay? Speaking of time, I'd like to introduce our timekeeper for this evening, Roxanne Robbins, right there. She's got a stopwatch, and she's got cards to count down so that the folks will know how much time they have. So it's color-coded. That says 30 seconds. So they'll know they've only got 30 more seconds to speak so they can start wrapping up. And then the dreaded red. Okay? Okay, ground rules. Obviously, the intention is to have a thoughtful conversation and for people to be able to hear the responses of the 3 candidates, not for people to cheer in the audience or to kind of have a scene for their candidate or to boo the people whose response they don't like. So with that, I want to tell the candidates, don't feel pressured to use all the time. If you answer a question and that's your answer, don't feel like you have to keep rambling, because sometimes you get in trouble if you do that. So just answer it and complete your statement, and then we'll move on. We can use the time. We'll stop you if you run over. And then for the audience, we would really like you to hold all applause until the end of the evening. One, because it takes up a lot of time, and in order to get all your questions answered, you don't want to spend time with people cheering and loving at one answer, and then us losing valuable conversation. So please refrain from the applause. You can applaud them all very well at the end of the evening and show them how much you appreciate their offer of spending their time with you. I'll remind you if you forget, okay? So that, because I will tell you, in order to keep this process nice, I'm going to stop if I think we're getting uncomfortable or people aren't behaving appropriately and making people uncomfortable. I will stop the process to remind everybody that we're here to respect everybody's opinion and everybody's input. So whether you like the question or whether you like the answer, please be respectful and remember that people are giving their thoughtful answers. Okay, we are going to begin our opening statements with Erin, and we're going to go from left to right for this. So Erin Edwards, and we'll just go down the row, and then when I start asking the questions, I will start with Michael and go down, and then the next question I will start with Philip, so that everybody gets to be a first, a second, and a third. They all get a chance to be in the heat of giving the first answer, and they all get to wrap up at one point. And then when we do the closing statements, we will start and we will go in the opposite direction. Michael gets to be in the middle both times. Okay, so with that, Erin, is our timekeeper ready? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you so much for being here. My partner and I bought our first house in Heritage Square downtown, where we currently live and have chosen to raise our family. Our neighbors hadn't been able to afford rent and frequently hosted their friends who were unstably housed. And that is how I met Carly. And she and her husband lived in essentially a box this far away from our house. And when it would rain, like it does in this season, the roof of that box would cave in, flooding everything that they owned. They had been on a list for affordable housing for over a year and a half. Homelessness is one of the biggest issues our city faces. It is literally in our backyards, and addressing it is my background, managing a $7 million portfolio of health investments at a United Way, leading a network of soup kitchens, food pantries, and homeless shelters. I am running for city council because we need a council member who has experience working on and securing funding for complex issues like homelessness. It's an issue that's on everyone's mind, and I hear this when I walk door to door in our neighborhood, from those who live near the river bottom to those who live near the downtown core. I have the experience and the fresh perspective to be a leader on the biggest issues that our city faces. My campaign has been endorsed by Congressman Mark Takano, by Assembly members Medina and Cervantes, the nurses of Riverside Community Hospital, and, among others, local Ward 1 neighborhood leaders. I look forward to your questions this evening.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next person will be Michael.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Riverside is at a critical point in its history. We face significant financial hurdle as we take the pension funding challenge that faces our state and our local governments. Our city has come a long way, but we have a long way to go. We must tackle homelessness, update our general plan, and complete the Northside specific plan. Our housing element is not up to par. We need to fix that and provide housing for all our residents, from the wealthiest to the most desperately poor, from young people just starting out to senior citizens. We must maintain a balanced budget and adequate reserves while continuing to fund critical city services like public safety, parks, street improvements, and tree trimming. Riverside needs to focus on attracting smart development that brings quality jobs with good benefits while being respectful of our land, air, and water. We need to cut commutes by bringing jobs here and that offer good employment and opportunities to the young people graduating from our local schools. I devote my full time to being a council member, as I believe the job demands and you deserve. I'm generally recognized as the voice of reason and a calming force on the city council. Knowing that we will have 3 new council members in wards 3, 5, and 7, I believe that my proven leadership, knowledge, and experience are particularly important to guiding our city through the coming years. Look forward to talking with you on questions. Thank you.
Philip?
Good evening, everyone. I would like to first thank the American Legion for hosting us this evening. To all the veterans that are in the room, thank you for your service to our country. I also wish to thank everyone that is here participating this evening and being a part of this vital piece of our democracy. 14 years ago, I would not imagine sitting here before you today. My family came to Riverside after Hurricane Katrina with only 5 days worth of clothing in our suitcases. And the generosity of this community got us on our feet and offered new opportunities. Those opportunities have included serving as a city commissioner and working for Mayor Bailey, experiencing firsthand how our city operates. For this, I am deeply grateful to this community. This gratitude leads me to give back by serving you on the City Council. Riverside is my passion, and I recognize we face significant 21st century challenges that require fresh, innovative thinking. My vision for Riverside focuses on the big picture, ending cycles of short-sighted decisions. I envision modernized infrastructure to sustain our neighborhoods for the future. I envision responsible development that brings high-quality jobs while preserving our unique character. I envision residents enjoying a high quality of life with a sense of security and comfort in their surroundings. I am not alone in this vision. Together with fresh thinking, we can make it a reality. I look forward to discussing these ideas with you this evening. Thank you for being here.
Thank you all. Okay, I'm now going to start with the questions. As I said, these were submitted to the committee from the community. I'm going to read them verbatim so that I'm not going to put a spin on them or my own interpretation. This is literally what was submitted. And they cover a number of topics, some of which may be on your cards. Okay, the first one, we will start with Mike Gardner, then we'll do Philip, and then we'll come back to Eric. Okay? So, Measure Z was billed as the Public Safety and Vital Services Measure. However, two of the first major expenditures to be approved by the council once it passed were a brand new library and funding of pensions. Were these the correct priorities, and if not, what should have been funded first?
I would disagree that the first major expenditures were those two. We paid for 16 pieces of new fire apparatus. We've begun hiring 60 additional police officers. We are at 31 of those actually on the department now. And we acquired almost 100 new police vehicles. The library, I think, is incredibly important. I think it is a proper use of Measure Z. I disagree with the remainder of the council on spending as much on paying down pensions and sort of financial housekeeping as the city invested in that. We got our general fund reserve up to over 23%. We don't need that much in general fund reserve. We should have spent those dollars in things like tree trimmings, street repair, dealing with all the problems that we all face every day. Made that argument to the council and I was not successful. But I think in general we are headed the right direction. I will continue to argue that, well, we need to fund the pension deficit. It should not be primarily on the back of measures.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Philip, do I need to read the question, or would you want me to read it again? Okay. Measure Z was billed as the Public Safety and Vital Services Measure. However, two of the first major expenditures to be approved by the council once it passed were a brand new library and funding of pensions. Were these the correct priorities, and if not, what should have been funded first?
Since the passing of Measure Z, we as the residents of Riverside have received many vital services through that measure that was passed. We have seen improvements in infrastructure, but we haven't done enough. We have seen additions to critical quality of life needs, like adding to our police and fire forces, but we still need to do more. Many of our decisions have been somewhat short-sighted and not looking ahead and realizing that our infrastructure needs will continue to grow as we progress into our future, and that Measure Z is one of the basic things that we look to for funding those various needs. I will also add, when it comes to the library though and our pensions, the library is something that we as residents of Riverside and Ward 1 have experienced a challenge with for upwards of 20 years. It has been an ongoing challenge that we have been deserving of a new library, but just couldn't get quite across the finish line. Finally, that has happened, but it should have happened a lot sooner. And Measure Z was able to come along and assist in that. When it comes to the pension obligation, we are put into a situation in Riverside where we must uphold the promises that we have made to the city workers and the city employees. But it is also as important that we do not use Measure Z strictly for that. Measure Z was passed for critical quality of life needs. And so I would be in favor of investing more in infrastructure, investing more in ensuring we have safe communities, while also managing the pension obligation, but not using it strictly for that.
Thank you. You ready to go?
Yes.
Okay.
The library was an extraordinary investment that I am very much for. Having a downtown library is a dream that's 15, 20, 30 years in the making. And I know as a mom who regularly uses the library that not only is it an important gathering place as we go for story time, not only for small children, but also for seniors, for youth after school. It is also an investment in our public safety, having a strong downtown library. And important to be the city of art and innovation. We've heard from other cities that their library has become the hub in an innovation district, and in Riverside we can do the same. I am not sure that Funding pensions with Measure C is a decision that I would have made, nor would it be a decision I would make going forward. I look forward to seeing more programming for youth, which is also something that was promised in Measure C. And also, as is my background, fundraising, now that we have Measure C, which is a gift, thinking about how we can leverage this funding to attract other sources of funding to our city for our neighbors and our neighborhoods.
Okay, I'm going to move on to question number 2. This one, Philip will be the first one to respond. The majority of Riverside's historic and cultural landmarks reside in Ward 1. How do we balance cultural and historic preservation with the explosion of development happening in the downtown, as well as protect its unique character?
Historic preservation is my area of expertise. I serve on the Cultural Heritage Board for the City of Riverside, representing in a citywide seat the many residents of our city, to be the voice for preservation in our city, to ensure our cultural and historical landmarks are protected. But also with that, we have to realize that we are a city that is growing and changing, and we have to continue to move forward. But it is done in a way that is responsible. One of the key pieces of my platform speaks to responsible development. I root a lot of this in the new urbanism form of city planning, where we focus on the city core, preserving the unique assets that we have, like our various historic and cultural landmarks and points of interest, preserving that while also developing and changing to meet the needs of a growing population. And that can be done when you have a council that is minded in historic preservation, that is aware of the value of historic preservation, when it raises property values, when it generates tourism, when it brings more people to our downtown spending money and generating tax revenue. But I also look at it from a matter of principle. And we need to be good stewards of our historic landscape here in Riverside. We are a city that many other cities are envious of when it comes to our historic and cultural points of interest. And we must be better stewards of that. So I look forward to championing this on the City Council. This is my area of expertise.
The question was balancing culture and history with new development, and I don't see them as separate. I see what's new and what has come before, both as telling important pieces of our story. My home was built in 1924, it's a craftsman, and I chose that home because I love the charm of Riverside. We know that it's what brings people here and makes people stay, and that's something on council that I will fight to protect. Also, we've seen some great work downtown, keeping original facades and building within them, again, to be able to tell the story of our past and the story of where we're going. And also on City Council, I'll make sure that not only in Ward 1 are we preserving our history, but that we look at all the wards in the city, make sure that we're connecting historic places to each other to do an even better job of telling the story of what makes Riverside such a unique and wonderful place to live.
Thank you. History is part of what makes Riverside Riverside. One of the things that is really unique about our city, and that I want to fight really hard to maintain, and we've done it in the almost 50 years I've been here, and we can continue to do it, is we feel like a small town. Our neighbors know each other, we care about our city, we care about the interesting historic things in our city. We have some really good examples in Ward 1 of things the city has done well in the way of historic preservation, and some really bad ones. Good ones include the renovation of the Fox Theater, the Municipal Auditorium, not a lease, but a preservation of the historic facade that I think is going to be really good when it's done is the Stalder Building immediately across from the Fox Theater. Ones that we did very poorly include the Press Bindery Building, which was taken down and never should have been. That was not part of the original agreement. And while I like the end result, I don't think we did as good a job as we could have with the facade of the Imperial Hardware Building in that new project.
We are on to question number 3, and Aaron will be the first one to respond. What is your vision for growing and sustaining the downtown economy and cultural activities? What will you do to support a vibrant economy in Ward 1, specifically downtown?
I love living downtown. I love that I live in a place downtown where I can walk and go to coffee shops and restaurants. And my vision for downtown, my vision for the city, to be honest, is to have more walkable communities where we can create what they call third places. That means not the place that you live, not the place that you work, but the place that you want to spend your time. You see people with laptops in coffee shops, going to events in bookstores. That's what keeps people excited about a place. That's what keeps the economy growing. That's what supports local business. That's my vision for downtown. When it comes to culture, what I'd love to see is a city that doesn't let nonprofit groups that have been very important, and again, that's my background, the nonprofit sector, that doesn't allow nonprofit groups to do all the heavy lifting when it comes to our culture in Riverside. For example, protecting our Chinatown. Right now, Chinatown is an empty lot. We have a lot of history there and beautiful community-led plans to be a park. That's something that I would champion on City Council.
My vision for downtown is we need more people living downtown, more projects like the Imperial Hardware Lofts project, like the Stalder project. That's what will generate the kinds of things that we would like to have downtown but don't, like a grocery store, for example. And some shops that we would like to see, but we just don't have the population to draw yet. We are focusing at the moment on residential and on the hotel industry. We have one hotel under construction, will open this fall. There are two others that are in the works and will be coming along shortly. That will help support our convention center, which generates the traffic that keeps many of the restaurants and shops afloat. And I think that's critically important for us. On the culture side, I think our new main library is critically important. It's going to have more and better meeting rooms and learning opportunities. And moving the library from its current building is going to allow us to open the Cheech Marin Center for Chicano Art, Culture, and Industry, which is a real coup for our city, and I think critically important.
My vision for downtown is one that is rooted in long-term economic prosperity. A good example of something like this is we have with the Food Lab in our downtown, where it serves as really an incubator space for individuals who otherwise could not own their own standalone brick-and-mortar restaurant. And when you look at incubator spaces and what that necessarily means, I go back to what I started with in the previous question about the new urbanist model of development, where we focus on a downtown core, look to mixed use, look to incubator spaces that serve as places for small businesses to start up. Riverside has a long history of being a community of small businesses, and small businesses in our downtown are the backbone of our local economy. So my vision would be fostering small businesses, ensuring that they have the opportunities to get started, similar to those that have now started the Food Lab, and foster that as we move forward to encourage those that live in Riverside to invest their money in starting a business in Riverside and employing Riversiders. From the cultural standpoint, though, I think we address back just to what was said in regards to historic preservation and the maintaining of the cultural feel in our downtown core. You can walk down any street in our downtown and you will feel the vibrancy that exists. We still have so much more to do, but we know that we are at a point now that allows us to be a launching pad for so much more. So I think it's a combination of maintaining what we have, moving forward, and encouraging that small business investment.
We're going to move on to question number 4, and Mike, you will be the first one to respond. Livability issues like parking, transportation, green spaces, and access to healthy food impact quality of life for individuals and community well-being. Economically, oh, I'm sorry, you can't, okay, I'll repeat it. Thank you for letting me know. like parking, transportation. Still can't hear me? Okay. We need IT.
Hello? Hello? Oh. It's not on. Testing. We'll try this one.
Okay, try this one. Okay, try it again. You hear that? Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, I will start again. Livability issues like parking, transportation, green spaces, and access to healthy food impact quality of life for individuals and community well-being, economically, environmentally, and socially. What are your 1 or 2 top investment priorities for making Riverside a more livable city? Michael, you start.
Thank you. I'm proud of my record on green spaces. I had a great deal to do with the creation of Monumental Park. Originally it was going to be Tekesty Park. My predecessor wanted that to be a housing development. And it was a big issue in the election when I was first elected. I was instrumental in having Martha McLean Park given to the city by County Parks. And I was instrumental in the purchase of a 49-acre open space parcel at the foot of the Box Springs Mountains. Parking is a huge challenge in downtown Riverside. We have lost a lot of surface parking to development, some temporarily during construction, and it will come back, some permanently. We need another downtown parking structure. I think that is a key investment for us in the future. Transportation, though, is changing over time. We are getting close to having autonomous vehicles. For those, you won't park them near where you go. In fact, you won't park them at all. It will deliver you. It'll go park itself and it'll come back and get you later. As that happens, there will be less demand for parking in the downtown core. So it's an interesting balance. As far as food goes, I'm pleased to announce, if you've not heard, that at the current location of the Salted Pig, they will be opening a new vegan restaurant.
Riverside has a long history of having a bustling downtown, and not far from there, having open spaces, green spaces, much of that being on the north side of our city. And I think that is something that is critical to moving forward in our city, and a vision that I have, and that we do have all the excitement of our downtown, but also have the availability and the opportunity for open green spaces in our north side and other portions of our city. And that's an important balance to have. When it comes to transportation in our downtown, we have to realize that looking ahead, transportation is indeed vastly changing. And parking needs are growing at this point in time, but parking needs in the near future may be shifting. And we have to, at this point in time, balance both of those needs. One of those things that I would consider would be looking at various developments in our downtown and ensuring that there is sufficient parking requirements both for the development that is going up as well for the needs of surrounding areas. And that is something that has not previously occurred. We have to maintain that balance. And as we look at new ways of transportation, and as we look at better opportunities for individuals to use our public transportation, we must encourage that and inform the individuals about the opportunities that exist. So it is a balance in many regards, a balance between all the excitement of our downtown, along with the green spaces and ensuring those are maintained, along with the balance of parking in our downtown with various transportation opportunities.
When it comes to my top 2 priorities, I know I did talk about walkability. I'd love to talk about walkability. Again, it's so important for us downtown as a city, particularly green spaces and how they play into walkability of neighborhoods. My dream has been, while we are so lucky to have many beautiful big parks in Ward 1, that we can now look at pocket parks. Things that will delight and surprise people as they're walking around downtown, to cultivate a spirit of playfulness in Riverside. Because playfulness, not just for young people, for all people, is what drives tourism, is what fosters a sense of innovation. My second priority would be a grocery store downtown. And to have a grocery store, we need more housing. We must build more housing, both to rent and to buy. And on City Council, not only will I ensure that we have the housing that we need, I'll make sure that there are many affordable options as well.
Okay. All right, now we're moving on to question number 5, which piggybacks a little bit on what we were just talking about. In a recent Nextdoor posting directed at Ward 1 residents, members were asked the question, do you feel safe in our area parks? An overwhelming 97% of responses answered some form of no. Dana, which is the organization, the sponsoring organization, senior, has recently announced a Safer Parks initiative that addresses the 600 acres of parkland and green space in Ward 1, as well as miles of river trail bordering the entire western edge of the ward that go virtually uncontrolled by law enforcement and lawlessness allowed to run rampant for far too long. Do you support the Downtown Area Neighborhood Alliance in their efforts to see the Safer Parks initiative implemented as written and return our city parks and green spaces to the taxpayers to enjoy without fear? Okay, first person to speak will be Philip.
In its current form, we are faced with several challenges with the proposal of the reintroduction of the Park Ranger program in Ward 1. One of those challenges is that the river bottom being a part of this proposal does not just belong to the city of Riverside. It belongs to the city of Riverside, the county of Riverside, and River Valley. And the challenge that we're facing in that regard is having police or park rangers ultimately going around the river bottom and chasing criminal activity, or in some cases perhaps homelessness, from one location to another location and pushing them off of the city of Riverside property into the county perhaps, but nonetheless it would still be in the river bottom and would still be a concern to we, the residents of downtown. And that is a significant challenge. Another significant challenge that we're faced with is the money piece. Many of us are familiar with the fiscal challenge that we are faced with in the city of Riverside. And we have to consider ways of looking at this from the root of the problem versus enforcing more police officers on the street to go up and down the river bottom, 2 in a car at a time, finding the criminal activity and ensuring that that is mitigated. That's a very difficult thing to happen. And we're also faced with, you imagine 2 officers at $200,000 a year roughly. That is then, you could have more than that, $500,000 a year, and that is money that I would much rather be focused on spending that addressing the root of the cause that we are facing, addressing more of the underlying issues that are facing with crime and homelessness in our city.
I'll start by saying that I am a member of Dana and a liaison to Dana's executive committee, and I have heard the Park Ranger proposal, the Safer Parks initiative, and I've seen several presentations, and I absolutely support this proposal and will be a champion of it on City Council. What I particularly love about this idea is that it came from the community, and people who live in their neighborhoods know very best what is needed and often the best ways to address it. And I believe that as a City Council person, it is very important to listen to those voices, and it is a gift to have an idea that is already so well formed to be presented in the way that this has been. The river bottom, which is a piece of the unmanaged space that this proposal would address, does need to be looked at. Yes, park rangers, but also to make sure that we all feel safe, we have to think of other ways that we can be managing the space that right now is seen as being very wild and lawless. So there are some long-term ideas, some short-term ideas. I'd like to see ways as a community that we are creative and think about how to create pop-up events in that place to draw people out, because we know when neighbors come and enjoy spaces, that's how we start to feel safer in them. So looking for ways, yes, park rangers, but also how can we bring neighbors to these spaces so we're less afraid of them.
Okay, this is a really good idea, although I don't see it as limited to Ward 1 alone. There are other parts of the city that are undeveloped that border the river bottom, that border other natural areas like Sycamore Canyon Park, our biggest part in terms of acres. To that end, at next Tuesday's council meeting, the council is going to be considering a proposal by the city manager's office to create public safety engagement teams. The teams would be composed of police officers, code enforcement, homeless services personnel, and contractors who can clean up after an encampment is relocated, if that ends up being part of an operation. They won't be there always. If the area being looked at as a park, parks personnel would be there. If it's utility property, utility personnel would be there. This, depending on what council approves, could cost as much as $3.5 million a year. The current proposal, and I think a correct one, is to fund that with Measure Z dollars. We have an overcollection from estimated and budgeted in the Measure Z account now. I think that's exactly the kind of use that people had in mind when they voted for Measure Z.
Okay, this is the next question. Erin will start with first. Each of you are supporters of the Housing First model the city adopted to help alleviate the homeless crisis in Riverside. We know that it will take years to fully implement the program. What are some things you would do, if elected, to immediately make a measurable difference to our quality of life?
I'll just start by reiterating that yes, I am definitely a champion of the Housing First model. It is the gold standard policy, and we know that it will work for most people. But even when it works perfectly, we're looking at 400 units, we're looking at 5 years. So I agree, we need some short-term solutions, and that will come from innovation from our community. So in my background addressing homelessness, I have piloted models such as a youth post-home program that has looked at what it takes to build, say, an emergency shelter. That's very expensive and can take a long time. But if we map what the assets are in our communities, we can create models that are a third the cost that, for example, would match a young person experiencing homelessness with an extra room in someone's home. Well, this wouldn't work for everyone, but it would work for some populations within the population of people experiencing homelessness. So the first thing I would do for some of these lower hanging fruit short-term solutions is looking at how we can segment the population of people experiencing homelessness, think about what kinds of services each segment of the population would need, and think about how we can surround those services and find funding for them, some relatively quickly.
Housing is a real challenge for us, and as was said, I think all three of us are supporters of the Housing First method of attempting to provide housing and assist our currently homeless population. First thing that we need to do, and the council has approved the concept, we have applied for a grant that will fund it, but the council still needs to approve ongoing operation to build out our Hewlin-Place shelter that will more than double the number of shelter beds that we have available. It will provide a day drop-in center, a place where it's okay for people to be during the day. We have laundry and shower facilities, improved medical facilities, and for the first time, it would offer mental health beds, something we lack that is critical. We are building this year in Ward 1 a 10-house, tiny house village to house formerly homeless people. As Aaron mentioned, accessory dwelling units can add an inexpensive or less expensive means of housing in single-family residential areas. The city has approved the first round of regulations on how we accomplish that. And we need to build more affordable housing overall in partnership with the companies that do that.
I am proud to be a supporter of the Housing First model. I was fortunate to be working under Mayor Bailey when this plan was in its inception and saw it from point one to where we are now. And he has made significant impacts to our community. And of course, I would be in favor of the addition of beds to our homeless shelter and emergency options. However, we are poised with a county of Riverside that has adequate funding to address some of the most critical homeless needs in our region. And I'm fortunate where I was able to reach out to our county supervisor, who stands ready and willing to form partnerships with other jurisdictions in the region, other city leaders in the region, to look at how we address homelessness in a regional manner. The money and the funding is there and is able to be allocated for various municipalities and jurisdictions within the county of Riverside. And that is a piece of it that is very important, because that is also both a short-term and a long-term solution. Together, those two go hand in hand. The funding is there, and we just need the voices at the table, creating the partnerships and ensuring it happens.
Okay, that concludes the pre-prepared questions, so now we're going to move to your index cards. We'll try to get through as many as possible. I can tell you right now, there are probably more than what we'll be able to address. A lot of you sent in questions. I'm going to try to pick topics that we haven't addressed at all, so if you handed in something about parks, that may get moved to the back so that we can deal with other kinds of issues just to make this diverse. And I'm going to try, I apologize if I don't read your handwriting correctly. This one is very specific, and it has to do, I should also say, Mike, you'll be the first one to speak, okay? It has to do with the River Valley transmission line. What do you feel about the dangers of high voltage power lines projected to be installed, particularly along the Santa Ana River? And what is your position on underground versus above ground installation? What is your overall position on the project?
Let me start with the overall position on the project. Riverside desperately needs a second interconnection to the statewide grid. We are the only city in California, anywhere near our size, there's some tiny ones, but they're not incorporated, that does not have multiple connections to the grid. Our one existing connection is not sufficient to serve our peak load. And so we absolutely have to have a project. It is currently before the Public Utilities Commission. That commission will make the decision on how much of the line is undergrounded, if any or all, and Riverside will abide by that. There are advantages and disadvantages to both overhead and underground construction. If you're concerned about electromagnetic fields, dirt is not an insulator, so the electromagnetic fields are actually higher. Close to the right-of-way with an underground line and an overhead line. The fire danger is real, but is much less a risk for lines of that size. Those towers are very strong. The spacing of the conductors from each other is large, so it is very difficult for the conductors to be blown together and create a spark. That's what started the big fire up in Northern California. But it was a much lower voltage line. And I'm out of time.
The RTRP project is one that I have been watching very closely. I oftentimes speak about the importance of investing in our infrastructure for the sake of the long run here in Riverside. And we absolutely need a second connection to the statewide grid. It is an absolute disservice that we do not currently have that. Much of what will happen in terms of the above ground and underground will be dictated to the various communities and cities. And we have to ensure that all community members are being heard. Our various boards and commissions that have expertise in this regard are being heard and listened to. And those are the advice that we must be taking. So it is important to look at ensuring that we always put public safety first when it comes to the chance of fire or the danger that may exist, but we also need to be ensuring that we're listening to the community members and those that specialize in this.
We absolutely need a second connection to the grid. It is a health issue, a safety issue, people who rely for medical needs on electricity, for example. This is also a very complex issue and a generational project. It's also important to note that we are already paying for the RTRP. When I look at my bill, I'm paying $10 a month, and some people pay more. We will be paying for this project until it is completed and until it is all paid for. So we need to make sure that as leaders that this project moves forward as efficiently in a manner that's cost effective as possible, but also that we're listening to voices in the community. And for me, for this particular project, that's the biggest issue or biggest lesson to be learned here, that we need to have community consultations about big projects like this much sooner, and that we need to work from the beginning with county, with other cities to build coalitions to make sure that when we undertake big projects that impact our city so much, that our neighbors are on board to help and that we are helping them and making sure that their communities and their economic development can thrive.
Okay, now we are going to go to a philosophical question. And we will start with Philip. How would you deal with an item where your constituents as a whole differ from your personal view and perspective?
I get the philosophical one to go. Philip is philosophical. I think that there is an important piece of our government that we are an elected democracy, a representative democracy, and that the voters of the various wards, in our case in Riverside, the various wards, elect representatives hoping that they will be true representatives of what they wish. I think it is important that when you have a very vocal community like we do here in Ward 1, that the council member is able to and very willing to listen to the needs of the community. Those are the individuals that have put them in that seat, and those are the individuals that the council person must listen to. However, there are also pieces that you receive from various members of the community, sometimes some that are louder than others, and it is important to maintain a balance in the community and ensuring that one voice in the community does not become louder than another, and ensuring that neighborhood groups, community members are all listened to equally and fairly.
I'll start by saying that one of my first jobs was in front of a high school classroom, so I'm no stranger to having differing opinions to mine, also being a parent and being a member of so many community groups. For me, what's important is listening and process to make sure that everything that is before a community is clear and transparent, and that we have the conversations, and as I said, that we have the conversations early on, and that as a council member, we're using what we hear in the community to form trends and help us set policy. We will not always agree, but I do commit to you as your council member that I will always listen and respect your opinion and ask questions.
In 12 years on the council, I have yet to see an instance where the constituency was united in their view on an issue. We think differently, being people, and you have to get used to that. And as a council member, you have to make the tough decisions sometimes. The hardest one is where it's right down the middle. Half the people think one way and half the people think the other way. My job is to represent my constituency to the best of my ability. When I have some information that the constituency may not, it's my job to try to share that and explain why that influences my vote to go a way that would be different than some of you might wish. There will always be others of you, though, who think I did the right thing. And we have a number of those. We have had recently, we've got more coming. Communication is a key. We have 6 active community groups in Ward 1. I rarely miss one of those meetings. Any of you who go to those know that Lynn and I are almost always there. And I think that is a good method of communicating. You all know my cell phone number, you know my email, and you know that I respond when you get hold of me. I think that's the job of a council member, and I will continue to do that.
Okay, this is a specific question, and we will start with Erin. This is about, sorry. This is a specific question, and Erin will speak first. And this is specifically about the Harada House. Future funding of the Harada House. Where is it your priority?
The Harada I mentioned earlier, we need to show political will for these historical places and communities that make Riverside who we are. I was at the city council meeting maybe a year ago when a piece of the house was shaken and you could hear the termites rattling around inside. And this is such an important piece of history that is on Lemon Street, very close to where I live. It is a top priority to me to make sure that not only we keep these spaces vibrant, but that as a community we continue to tell those stories so we never repeat what happened.
Aurora House is really important from a historical perspective and from a civil rights perspective. That said, the building itself is in terrible condition. It is being held up from the inside by scaffolding. You don't see it from the outside. But if you go inside the building, you cannot just walk around freely. It is full of scaffolding to hold the place up. The city has invested over $200,000 in engineering analysis and studies to date, and the city helped form Harada House Foundation that will raise the money to complete restoration and have an ongoing endowment for long-term maintenance. It is currently under the care of our city's museum, not an open facility. It will be difficult to open the facility to the public in any event without significantly modifying it, because all of the floors are either raised or lowered above ground level. So ADA access is not something easy to do. You have to widen doorways, move walls, and that all damages the historic fabric of the building. It is a real challenge, but funding will come from a range of state and federal and various nonprofit endowments.
For a number of years, I've been an active member of the Riverside Metropolitan Museum, predominantly the Riverside Museum Associates, which is a nonprofit organization that focuses on the betterment of the Riverside Metropolitan Museum proper in our downtown, the Heritage House, along with now the Harada House. And we have a very strong fundraising foundation, the Harada House Foundation, that is going about doing all things necessary to raise the funds that will be needed to restore the Harada House. We have quite a few notable members of that committee, and I have all the confidence in them that they are able to achieve their fundraising goal, and I'm more than willing to assist them in any means possible. Earlier this evening, I spoke about the importance of historic preservation, and that is why I'm committing to you to do all I can to ensure the Harada House is in fact restored. Historic preservation is the way we go about telling our story here in Riverside. It is the way we attract people to our city to come and visit our city, and in some cases perhaps move to our city, spend money in our city, and those are valuable things that we must be using. So I think the future for the Harada House is indeed bright. The progress may be slow, but the future is bright.
Okay, we are going to start another wave, so Mikey will be first. What are you going to do about parking in the downtown area, specifically the residential streets? How much do you have to pay to park in front of your house? I just read it.
I understand it. A little background on where that comes from. We have several neighborhoods around Ward 1 that are heavily impacted by people from outside the neighborhood. Originally it was RCC, now it is spreading into other parts of the downtown, around the convention center. Festival of Lights brings zillions of people and they want to park somewhere. As a result, the city created something called a permit parking zone, which any neighborhood can form. To initiate one, it's $33 a household to create the process and the permit. If you lose a permit or if you change vehicles, it's $33 to replace that permit. I do not have a permit parking zone in my neighborhood, so I do not pay. No one is required to pay. No one is required to participate in a permit parking zone. It's a strictly volunteer thing, or voluntary. You decide as a neighborhood whether it's something you want to do. It does have drawbacks, and money is only a piece of it. If you forget to hang up your permit, you get a ticket just like the RCC student. So it is a tool to deal with a significant problem, but it has to really be a significant problem to you to make it worthwhile to you.
I do not believe that it is appropriate for a homeowner or someone living in our downtown core to have to pay to park in front of their own home. I think that one of the ways that we go about solving this, predominantly with a long-term focus, is that when we have greater parking options in our downtown core, predominantly the business district or the government, the law portion of our downtown, that then allows for individuals that perhaps are going to see a show at the Fox or are going to see the Festival of Lights have greater parking options in that portion of the downtown instead of going into some of the residential streets, Mount Rubidoux Drive, 6th Street, and parking there. So if we perhaps work with our developers and ensure that greater parking options are available in various developments that are going up in our downtown. Many of you know that we are seeing exponential growth in our downtown. We have developers almost in every corner in our downtown. Are we going about ensuring that there are enough parking options with each development? That is something that I will commit to doing on the City Council. When we have greater parking options in that portion of downtown, it will then help with the mitigation of parking of individuals that are coming to our downtown on the various streets in the residential portion of the downtown.
Parking is an issue that will take thoughtful action for a growing city, both when we think about parking in our downtown and also when we think about parking in residential areas. The truth of the matter is that as a city, when you look at the budget, we are currently losing money on parking. And so it will take some creative solutions, again, to think about what this will look like for Riverside as we grow, because we are growing. I have a few ideas. One is parking benefit districts. And the idea is that if you pay to park in your neighborhood, or if others pay to park in your neighborhood, then that money is able to go directly back to the neighborhood where people are parking. And that allows for tree trimming, for streets to be paved, for other priorities that are identified by neighbors. May not work in Riverside, but is something that could be worth exploring. Also, when we think about downtown, we look to other cities, for example, Palm Springs, that has what's called the Buzz Bus, and allows you to park further out, to hop on and off the bus for free, to be delivered directly to the door of the place where you were hoping to shop, for example. We can think about geomapping parking so it's easier to find. And finally, as a daughter of a parent with mobility issues, it will always be important to me to make sure that parking is directly available and accessible for people who need it.
Okay. Next question, Philip will take the lead on. This is another philosophical one. I don't know. What can I say? If the city were given $25 million to use as it sees fit, what are the issues most important to you, and how do you plan to prioritize spending that money?
$25 million payday, ultimately, is what you're asking. I think we have several critical needs in our city. First and foremost, addressing homelessness in our city is of the utmost importance. Of course, earlier this evening we spoke about the Housing First model and all that our mayor and other stakeholders in the city and the faith-based community are doing to make that happen. Some money there would be a welcomed addition to ensuring that we address that portion of the homeless population. We also could use some of that money. I feel like I'm just saying a birthday wish here, you know. Some of that money could go towards funding other critical homeless services, perhaps looking at long-term solutions to addressing homelessness. These are the areas right now that we could use some of that funding for. So first would be homeless. Second, I look at our infrastructure in our city. We have infrastructure that in many places has been failing. We can just look further along into our city, into Ward 6. Not too long ago, we saw a major water main failure. This could happen in Ward 1. We have to be investing in our infrastructure. So take some of that $25 million and use it towards infrastructure repair, road repaving, tree trimming, sidewalk repairs. Those are critical day-to-day quality of life needs that are needed in downtown and Ward 1 and all across our city.
Certainly, if we're gifted with $25 million, one of the first things I would think about if this was unrestricted money that hadn't been allocated for anything that was a complete surprise, we need to think about addressing our pension liability. And if we can pay down our pension liability, we can use this $25 million gift to hopefully leverage other funding sources that can come to the city, which is an expertise of mine. And once we've started with this gift money to pay down our pension, that frees up other money to help address homelessness, which is absolutely a priority of mine, to invest in our neighborhoods, to make sure that everyone feels safe and secure where they live, and to go to the residents and make sure that we are funding the needs that are most important to them.
If we had a $25 million gift falling out of the sky, I would want to invest it in street repair, sidewalk repair, tree trimming, those things that I think you envisioned more of Measure Z dollars going to, and they did not. We have other mechanisms of funding the pension burden, homelessness, all of those things. A one-time thing, I think we should do something that the city would see that would make us better quickly. And I think that would also improve our ability to draw more and better businesses to the city, and that economic development in itself will generate more revenue through existing tax sources, which will fund more things that we need to do, including all of those other things.
Okay. Aaron, this is your turn to be first. Your ideas to resolve criminal activities in the Metrolink station in downtown Riverside.
It's important that everyone feel safe, secure, and connected where they live. And when I talk to people about downtown Riverside, I heard actually from a woman recently that she does not feel safe in downtown Riverside after dark alone. But she told me that the one time that she does feel safe downtown Riverside after dark alone is during the Festival of Lights. Why? Because there are more lights, because there are more people, families, businesses are open longer, later. And I'm not suggesting that we have Festival of Lights all year round, but I am saying that investing in our downtown, making sure that we have a thriving downtown with businesses that can be open with families who feel comfortable coming down, that's what makes downtown safer. Because of course, if you look at the numbers, statistically, downtown is the safest during the Festival of Lights. So that's one thought on addressing crime. Another thought is when I talked to the police chief about where the number of calls they receive, he told me that 50% of the calls they receive are actually about homelessness. Homelessness is not a criminal issue. We need to look at how we can be using police resources more efficiently and free up their time to address things that are actually criminal issues.
Actually, that question surprises me because I take Metrolink pretty frequently, and I do not feel the least unsafe there. Occasionally there's a car break-in. There have been a couple of instances, but they are pretty rare. Metrolink is operated by the Riverside County Transportation Commission. They provide security 24 hours a day there. And I think overall they do a pretty good job. Yes, bad things do happen on occasion, but I think it's rare there. Maybe more importantly, in Riverside's downtown, we have 4 regularly assigned beat patrol officers and a sergeant that we share with a big piece of Ward 3. In addition, just in the downtown and surrounding area, we have an additional 4 officers and a sergeant that have been assigned fairly recently. And we have 4 problem-oriented policing officers that are not patrol officers. They're assigned to individual problems that serve that portion of Ward 3 and the vast majority of Ward 1. No other one of our policing areas have that concentration of officers. I think that's key. It's important that we have them, It has made things better. We will get more officers citywide and in the downtown as we finish hiring the 60 officers that were promised through the first 5 years of Measure Z.
Public safety is one of the key responsibilities of local government. When it comes to the Metrolink station, this would require a partnership between the Ward 1 councilperson along with the Ward 2 councilperson, being that the Metrolink station, while in downtown, is also a part of the Ward 2 district. This also means that we need to be focused on ensuring that we do have more policing in our downtown, just to ensure that while, yes, more people are coming to our downtown, it does not always equate to a reduction in criminal activity. In some cases that is true, in some cases may not. And so we need to ensure that we are balancing the piece of public safety and ensuring that our police force is able to meet the needs of the population that we have, along with the piece of ensuring that everyone feels safe in our downtown. And I think that together with that partnership with the police department and the Measure Z fund that has been granted by the voters, and that was allocated for additional police force in our communities, and having the police officers involved in the various neighborhoods. Together, all of those things come to create a safer Metrolink station and a safer downtown.
Okay, the next question, Mark, you're first. Okay. Would you support a charter amendment to implement ranked choice voting, which is also known as instant runoff voting? I'm not sure how many people in the audience know about that process, but I'm hoping that the three candidates do.
I would not support that personally. I would not vote for it. If the Charter Review Committee brings it before the council as a recommendation, the council will need to consider whether to put that on the ballot for you to vote on. And the reason that I would not support it personally, they have that in the city of Oakland. And it's been several years now, but in Oakland, they elected a mayor who came in third in the popular vote. People can game that system, and people work their campaigns to push other candidates up or down in the ranking as best as they're able to. I don't like that system. A runoff is, I've been in one, they're not a whole heck of a lot of fun. They do take time, they do take money, but they are accurate, and your vote counts directly for the one person that you pick as your representative. So personally, I would not support it. If it's brought forward by the Charter Review Commission, I'll absolutely consider whether to put it on the ballot.
Philip?
The beauty of having the Charter Review Commission is that we have numerous individuals from all across our city that advise the city council on various amendments to our charter, our city's constitution. And I think depending on where the discussion goes with the Charter Review Commission, that would be something that the council person would have to look into and have to be willing to consider. I would be willing to hear the concerns, both the negative and the positive, for ranked-based voting from the Charter Review Commission, and I'll have to weigh those odds at that point in time. I, however, at this moment would not necessarily be in favor of supporting that. I am in favor of one vote for one person goes in and elects your representative.
This is a topic on which I would need to learn more. I've had several conversations with people who've seen this work very well in their cities, so I would say that it's something that I am open to considering, something I would need to learn a lot more about. But what sticks out to me in this question is more along the lines of trusting the recommendations of the Charter Review Commission. This is why we have boards and commissions made up of community experts, knowing that they are doing the research and having the conversations, and that when they bring recommendations forward, I think I was lost.
Keep going.
Oh, thank you. Hello?
Oh,
No? Did we lose everything?
Stop the timer, please. We all went down.
Oh no.
Time to use your outside voice.
Can you hear me if I shout? No. Okay. All right.
Just wait.
That's right.
Just repeat the question. Let us start.
Oh, I don't know. But thank you.
Can I get a test?
Hello? Oh.
You guys talk too much.
We ran the batteries down.
I'll just finish the sentence if that's okay. Just saying that it's important that we trust the recommendations of boards and commissioners, take that very seriously, and something I commit to doing on City Council.
Okay. Okay. I started roaming around on all my papers and lost my cheat sheet here. Okay, the next question. I think we're up to the next question. Yes? Okay, the next question is an interesting one. What cities do you look at as a model for what Riverside could be, and how can we get to be them? No, yeah, go. Okay.
I look at several different cities in Southern California and even across the country when it comes to various practices or ways of going about perhaps city development and city planning that I look to and select certain pieces from and admire. One of those being Savannah, Georgia. Savannah, Georgia has done an immense amount of work in terms of historic preservation, in terms of maintaining the uniqueness of their downtown core, of their old town, along with meeting the needs of a growing and changing population. And that's a key example of much of what I've spoken about this evening, this long-term planning, this new urbanist type city planning that focuses on mixed use, incorporating the uniqueness of downtown cores along with all the potential that can exist as we move forward. Another example being Pasadena. Many people that I've spoken with, some of them in this room this evening, have said that Riverside for many years has been poised to be the Pasadena of the Inland Empire. And I think we are heading in that direction, but there are still a few things that we need to do. We need to, of course, ensure that we maintain the uniqueness of Riverside. Riverside will never be Pasadena. We can pick and choose the various strong practices and patterns that the city of Pasadena does, and we can then adopt, but they also have gone about a way of growing and changing to meet the needs of a 21st century population, along with maintaining their uniqueness and maintaining their ability to be a city.
One city that I admire, and this is the place that I've lived for just over a year, is Winnipeg in Canada. And I promise you that I am not suggesting that we model it for the weather, but it's very cold there, for those of you who don't know Winnipeg. They are an extraordinary city when it comes to a live music scene, to a vibrant nonprofit sector that not only taps into a spirit of volunteerism, which we absolutely have here in Riverside, but also an extraordinary spirit of philanthropy, which is something that we need to develop here in Riverside, and we will as we continue to grow jobs and encourage people to live and work in the same place and invest here. Another element of Winnipeg that I love, that is something that I see here and that I'd like to see even more of, is pride of place. No one loves Winnipeg more than Winnipeggers, and they'll tell you all about it. And I hear that from people who have lived in Riverside. When I'm knocking on doors, people say to me, I've lived in Riverside my whole life. I love this city. I haven't lived in Riverside my whole life, but I also love this city and feel that pride in place and want to see us doing a better job telling our story and cultivating that within all of us.
There is no city that I would like Riverside to be like. We are Riverside and we should stay Riverside. We're unique. There are some things in other cities that I think are worth copying or taking bits of. Some of those cities include San Jose. I went to junior high and high school in the Bay Area, and San Jose was a pit. Now it is a tech center. Riverside has every possibility of being the tech center of, becoming the tech center of Southern California. Austin, Texas has done really interesting things with transportation, and housing, and entertainment, and use of their natural resources. I think we could learn some things from them. Phoenix, Tempe area has done really interesting things. the town lake in Tempe. I don't know that we could ever get away with damming the Santa Ana River and creating a lake, but the concept of using our river as a recreational and economic draw that we do not do now is very intriguing. I'd like to see us try to do some of those things. And lastly, Salt Lake City has done some absolutely amazing things in dealing with their homeless population. They have almost effectively, or almost completely, eradicated homelessness in the city, and we can do that too.
Okay, Erin, you're going to take the lead on the next question. What do you believe is a city council member's primary responsibility? 1, to listen and represent all Ward 1 residents, or 2, to bring your social, cultural, business priorities to the community? If 2, what priorities do you have? That's a long one.
The primary responsibility of a city council member is to represent the community and the constituents, and to be a voice in this case for Ward 1 and think about Ward 1 residents when making decisions for an entire city. And that is how I have led in the past, being a listener, hearing ideas of others. That's how I will continue to lead on city council.
It really has to be a combination if you're going to do a good job. Hopefully, you select your council member based partly on their ideas and what they've shown you that they think, what they've shown you that they're able to do, their leadership, their ability to get things done. But your council member has to listen to you, has to interact with you, seek ideas from you, bounce ideas off of you, and be guided in their actions by that. So truly, I think it is a combination.
There's no one role that a council person acts in. There are many, and many of them are of great importance. But of course, of the most important is ensuring that the council person is listening to the residents of the various district or ward, in this case, that you are elected to represent. And I commit to doing that. I think that being one with the community and being involved in the community, attending meetings, attending neighborhood groups, and hearing specifically what some of the greatest concerns of the residents are is of the utmost importance. It's also important, too, that you are willing to, in some cases, go to the residents. Yes, it's one thing to go to a neighborhood meeting, but it's also important to go to knock on doors, to be engaged with the community when it's not just election season. Having that interest in what concerns various neighbors in various neighborhoods, talking to them on their front porch and getting an idea for what their greatest challenges and concerns are very important for the council person to be aware of, to ensure that when they go back to that decision-making table in the city council chambers, that they have all of those thoughts, concerns, and ideas from the various neighbors in their mind and at work through their decision-making process.
Okay, the next question. Mike, are you up first?
Yes, sir.
I've lost track. Yeah, we keep rotating. I'm getting dizzy. Okay, this one has to do with street sweeping. Street sweeping keeps trash out of sewers. What is the city doing about trash going directly to the ocean via the Santa Ana River? Actually, it's written via the Santa Ana River homeless bottom. I think that's an editorial comment.
But the city can't control what happens outside its jurisdiction. There clearly is a problem with trash in the river bottom, whether it's in our city or adjoining cities or county territory. And we are not doing a good job of dealing with that. At this point, we're getting no support from agencies like Fish and Wildlife Service or the Corps of Engineers, who do have some jurisdiction, multiple local jurisdictions. They oversee multiple local jurisdictions in that respect. As far as the city itself goes, street sweeping is the least expensive way to meet the requirement of our permit to allow stormwater runoff to run into the Santa Ana River. We are prohibited from allowing a significant quantity of stuff that shouldn't be in the river. from washing into it. In fact, there's a new requirement that it was imposed by the State Water Quality Control Board about 18 months ago that is going to require some additional kind of diversion of the things that should not wash in, whether it's some sort of filtration system, improved street sweeping, manually picking things up. We're looking at a range of alternatives on how to do that.
I take the question and back up a few steps and even say that we are fortunate in the city of Riverside to have various organizations like Keep Riverside Clean and Beautiful, the Rivers and Lands Conservancy, and other organizations that are focused on ensuring our neighborhoods and our streets remain clean spaces, and we go about picking up trash and litter. And these are activities that oftentimes happen on a monthly, if not more frequent, basis. And that is one of the things that we must focus on getting ahead of the problem. And before it even gets into the storm drain and then down into our river bottom, we must look at how do we ensure our neighborhoods are places that are not heavily littered or trash filled. And we do that in a multitude of ways. One of them being having organizations like Keep Riverside Clean and Beautiful, but also having various neighborhood groups and some individuals here this evening that took it upon themselves to go out into their community and ensure that they pick up trash regularly and go down into the river bottom and clean up the river bottom. That is something that can happen at the community level, that we can ensure our river bottom as well as our streets and neighborhoods remain a clean place. And that is something that is very important. It adds a greater pride in the neighborhood in which you live, and it also is an advantage for our environment.
I've been a volunteer cleaning up the river bottom, cleaning up neighborhoods, and as I'm sure many of you have, and you know as well as I do, that it's extraordinary the amount of litter and what you find on the ground. And so I am proud that we're part of a community that does take care of cleaning up our litter when we can. What I love about this question is thinking about the river. We are called Riverside after all, and I on City Council would like to see us taking greater pride in our river and better care of our river. When we think about cities that we admire, thinking back to a previous question, many amazing cities have bodies of water where people play and spend time. I would love to see that for Riverside too, and that will take a very careful and intentional process to revitalize our river bottom, thinking about clearing out non-native plants that are there, making it a place where everyone will want to be.
Okay, we've covered a wide variety of topics. I know we haven't reached everyone's index card, but I think we would be here for hours longer if we tried to do that. So what I'm going to do is encourage you in the minutes after we break up to be able to, address your questions or your comments to the individuals, because we'll all still be here. So we will conclude the process by having each of them give us a 1-minute kind of wrap up. And we started with Aaron this evening, so now we're going to start with Philip and come back towards me, okay?
This evening you've heard distinctly different visions for our city. Many of the topics tonight have been long-time, persistent problems in our community. Instead of short-term approaches, I offer the fresh, forward-thinking approach to achieve lasting results. I will improve long-term planning to proactively replace aging infrastructure and sustain our neighborhoods for generations. I will partner with the county and neighboring cities to address underlying causes of homelessness, acknowledging that homelessness cannot be solved by Riverside alone. I will support developing responsibly to grow a vibrant local economy that provides high-quality jobs in a manner that preserves our city's historic character and hometown charm. I am the only candidate before you tonight that is a product of this community. I have grown up in Riverside, attended Riverside schools, and worked in City Hall. I have the dedication and the unique knowledge to serve this board and city. I ask you to join me and look forward to your vote on June 4th. Thank you very much.
Michael?
Thank all of you for coming this evening to listen to us. I came to Riverside New Year's Day 1971 to continue my education at UCR, graduated, went to grad school there, got married, we had 3 children. They all went through the Riverside public school system. I have lived in our city longer than either of my two people here have been alive. I'm the only candidate who has worked in the public sector, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and the government sector. I have the experience and the knowledge and proven leadership to take us where we need to go. With 3 other council members, brand new council members coming in, I think that is particularly important. I pledge that I will continue to do the same good job in the next years that I've done in prior years. I thank you and I ask for your support.
I'm inspired by this city, by our history, by our potential, and the opportunities ahead when we strive to be a city where everyone can thrive. Riversiders are so inspired by our campaign's vision for this city that they're volunteering for their first ever campaign, donating for the first time to a political candidate, engaging in local issues, and knocking on doors to talk about how we can make this city an even better place for our families. We can address homelessness, invest in our neighborhoods, and as the City of Arts and Innovation, put Riverside on the map. We will do it through courageous policy, political leadership, and the vision to do it without leaving anyone behind. I hope to earn your vote on June 4th.
I would like to thank the audience for being so superb in the way that you've responded. The amount of respect and attention is incredible. It doesn't always go this way in forums, I can tell you. In my jaded past, I've been in groups where they literally want to boo people and create drama. And this has been delightful to watch, because I think that I've had the opportunity to really see 3 unique and really talented individuals who are basically saying we offer ourselves to you. So I wish you well in your selection, and I hope you continue to ask them questions. There's a lot more topics. I can assure you that we didn't cover everything that you need to know about them, but I think you've got a great opportunity for leadership in Ward 1. So I thank you. It has been an honor to be the moderator. As I said, it was my first time to do this. Always been at the table. It's a lot more fun up here. So I wish you well and have a wonderful evening, and I'm going to turn it back to your host.
Ladies and gentlemen, join me in. Great job. Also, thank you to Maureen for another awesome job. Ladies and gentlemen, this is exciting to see this many people here and involved in this process. You know, it says a lot about where we live. You know, Ward 1. Not even my opinion, Ward 1 is the most exciting ward in the city, right? There's nothing going on like there is in Ward 1. And for you guys to be involved and this many people out here on a weeknight, it really says a lot about us as a community. So thank you so much. Thank you for the American Legion for allowing us this wonderful facility to hold our forum. If you're hungry, if your stomach has been growling through this forum, the kitchen is still open. Grab something to eat back there. As you leave, the bar's still open too, I think. We all need a drink after this. The American Legion has asked me to announce that there is a situational awareness meeting being held here. It's by the American Legion Auxiliary Unit 79, and it is on Saturday, March 30th, 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. So if you'd like more information about that, check them out. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time for the candidates. If you visit www.ward1election.com, you can find their podcasts. We did interviews with all of them. They give you their best answers to some of the biggest problems that face Riverside. And don't miss the next forum being held April 8th in the North Side, and then April 27th in the Grand area. So 2 more chances to keep asking these people the questions that are important to you. Thanks for coming.